hilariously, the last 2 days have seen a bunch of endorsements for Joe Biden. All it took was for everyone else to endorse Joe Biden for Barack Obama to endorse Joe Biden. So this morning, Barack Obama came out and endorsed Joe Biden. He said, "I'm proud to endorse my friend Joe Biden for president of the United States. Let's go." Well, here we are. I guess everybody else is out of the race. I guess it's a year since he declared, and I didn't endorse him. I'm basically useless. I led from behind, did nothing for a year. I am a good friend. I'm the best friend. I'm the guy you call when every other person will not drive you to the airport and all the cabs are broken. And then maybe I'll drive you to the airport, maybe not. Maybe I'll do it after the plane's left. That's what I do. I'm the president. Barack Obama. Love you, Joe. That's what this is. So I love the fact that Barack Obama's endorsement is actually less impactful than Bernie Sanders' endorsement at this point because he waited so long. Like, imagine if Barack Obama had endorsed Joe Biden before South Carolina. Then he'd be getting all the credit. But Obama never had any coattails, not for any other Democrat. Right? His Democratic Party got wiped out while he was president, wiped out in Congress, wiped out in the Senate, wiped out on the gubernatorial level, wiped out in the state legislatures. And this is one of the reasons why, because for all the talk about how Donald Trump is an egotist, which he assuredly is, Barack Obama is a massive egotist as well. And he was not willing to jump on the Joe Biden bandwagon, specifically because he was concerned that Joe was old and senile, which, by the way, Joe Biden is old and senile. You may have noticed this. So that was the second most important endorsement of the last 24 hours. The first most important endorsement was Bernie Sanders. I have to admit, I do love the fact that Bernie Sanders just cut off Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez at the knees. It is beautiful. So yesterday morning, there was a piece by Astiat Herndon over at the New York Times called "Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez has never spoken to Joe Biden. Here's what she would say." In an interview, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez said she intended to support the presumptive Democratic nominee, but the process of coming together should be uncomfortable for everyone involved. And so she wanted to make demands of Joe Biden so that the entire progressive wing would get behind the Joe Biden campaign. She said that the Biden campaign had not reached out to her. She said, "There's this talk about unity as this kind of vague kumbaya kind of term. Unity and unifying isn't a feeling, it's a process. And what I hope does not happen is that everyone just tries to shoo it along and brush real policies. That means the difference of life and death or affording your insulin and not affording your insulin, just brush them under the rug as an aesthetic difference of style. There's also this idea that if we all just support the nominee, voters will come along as well. I don't think this conversation about changes that need to be made is one about throwing the progressive wing of the party a couple of bones. I think this is how we can win." So she says that she wants the Medicare age lowered to 60. And they floated this out. I love this. They floated this olive branch to the progressive left, she says, of lowering the Medicare age to 60. It's almost insulting. I think Hillary was looking at policies that lowered it to 50. So we're talking about a progressive concession that is tenure worse than the nominee we had back in 2016. Progressives aren't like a monolith. Like every voting bloc isn't a monolith, but I know from a Latino perspective, I think we need a real plan to be better than what happened during his service with the Obama administration. I love she says that progressives aren't a monolith, but there is a monolithic Latino perspective. Very interesting. And then she says that she wants some sort of concessions on deportations. She says if we're not talking about paths to citizenship for undocumented people, if we're just talking about policy changes of 5 or 10%, it's not about moving to the left. It's about who is able to find hope in your administration. So she has this long interview with the New York Times talking about all the things that she wants from Joe Biden in order for her to endorse. And 5 seconds later, Bernie Sanders gets on a live stream with Joe Biden and endorses. Now, the great shock here is that both of them were able to work the live stream. And that is clearly the great shock here. There must have been a grandkid nearby who was able to work the camera. But watching Stadler and Hofstadter from the Muppets talk to each other here was really an experience. Or Sam the Eagle and Larry David. That was really an experience. That's kind of what they look like here. Have you ever seen a show this bad? No, I've not seen a show this bad since I walked out on the Ford's Theater in 1865. Ah! And that's what this was. It was unbelievable. So Bernie Sanders finally endorses Joe Biden for president. Joe Biden's doing it from his well-lit basement, and his forehead continues to climb up his entire head. It now constitutes the entire front portion of his cranium. Like his forehead actually starts midway through the top of his skull and now descends all the way to his nose, Joe Biden's forehead. And then you've got Bernie Sanders, who's like, I know I'm irrelevant now, but I have one more shot to say a thing, and here I am. The best part of this is that it was a live stream where they were supposed to be casual and fun, and Joe Biden was desperately trying to read off a teleprompter during the entire thing because Joe Biden has lost all capacity for independent human thought. It's over for him. He has no capacity. He's a Joe Biden bot, but like a crappy bot version 0.7. Not the one that was supposed to be released. He's AOL 1.0 with the dial-up connection. So So here is Bernie endorsing Biden with sufficiently more enthusiasm than Joe Biden, who is not actually an alive person.
We've got to make Trump a one-term president, and we need you in the White House. So I will do all that I can to see that happens, Joe. And I know that there is an enormous responsibility on your shoulders right now. And it's imperative that all of us work together to do what has to be done, not only in this moment, but beyond this moment, in the future of this country.
Okay, and then Biden did a bunch of stupid things. So Biden thinks that the way that he is going to unify the party is by making all sorts of concessions to Bernie and by starting to mimic Bernie's policies. And this is pretty much the dumbest thing you can do. The reason that this is the dumbest thing you can do is because Biden's entire campaign, the reason he shellacked Bernie, and he shellacked Bernie way worse than Hillary shellacked Bernie in 2016, right? Hillary narrowly beat Bernie. Biden just killed him. I mean, Biden whomped him. He won 11 out of 14 Super Tuesday states. The moment that people saw Bernie as a possible front runner, Bernie collapsed in on himself like the Soviet economy circa 1987. Okay, and so why would you, at this point, attempt desperately to mimic Bernie Sanders' policies? You just killed him. He's dead already. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, the best move here that Joe Biden could have made was to completely Joffrey Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie bends the knee, and Biden just lops off his head and selects Amy Klobuchar as his VP or something. Okay, but he didn't do that. Instead, Biden had to pay homage to Bernie. He says that Bernie is one of the most powerful voices ever. Of course, he's reading from a teleprompter while he says this.
It means a great deal to me personally. As I said in my statement, when you suspended your campaign, I want to thank you for being the powerful voice. And you've been the most powerful voice for a fair and more just America. It's a voice like yours that refuses to allow us just to accept what is. You've refused to accept that we can't change what's wrong in our nation. You refuse to accept that health and well-being of our fellow citizens and our planet isn't the responsibility of somebody else. It's our responsibility to act now. And you don't get enough credit, Bernie.
You don't get enough credit because I've been denying you credit because I think you're a crazy old loon bag. I am a crazy old loon bag. Of course I'm a crazy old loon bag. And you are going to give me all the things that... I don't need to do that. I killed you. No. You are going to give... And so Biden's like, oh, okay, fine. So then he starts saying crazy crap, which again is not going to benefit him in the election. So here's Joe Biden saying crazy crap, right? He says, you know what I think we should do? We should use wartime authority to force banks to give small loans to businesses. Wartime authority to force banks to give loans they would not otherwise give. So we're not just going to use the government to give out bad loans like we did during the subprime crisis or like we did during TARP or something. We are actually going to force small banks to give loans they don't want to give using wartime authority, which is just full-on economic fascism. I mean, that is what that is. When you seize control of the banks and force them to give loans, that is basically the definition of economic fascism. Here is Joe Biden suggesting it openly because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's lost all connection with reality.
We should insist that the Trump White House and the Treasury Department move more aggressively to get those grants and loans to small businesses now when they really need it. And if the banks won't do it, to go back to your point, they won't process the loans for small business regardless of their size, then the federal government should use their wartime authority to compel them to do so. Good. Because otherwise, in 6 months, we're going to look back and see that this crisis has only made inequity worse in America.
So we're going to use the government for redistribution of wealth in the middle of a global pandemic. And he says this again, right? He says, let's do a Green New Deal. Let's pursue progressive priorities. Let me be clear about something. One of the reasons you are not seeing like outright state refusal to listen to the federal government is the fact that Donald Trump is president. If these people, the people who are insisting on full-scale federal control of every aspect of your life, were using this crisis as an excuse to take control of businesses and banks across the country, there would be rightly talk of disobeying the federal government. There would be. Like, one of the things that is keeping things on lockdown right now is the fact that Trump obviously does not want to fundamentally shift the nature of the relationship between citizen and government. Joe Biden is scaring. This is scary, okay, because this is Joe Biden being Bernie. And this just shows that for the Democratic Party, their heart is still with Bernie, even though they're not willing to show it on the outside. So here is Joe Biden being Bernie on progressive policies while Bernie sits there bored and staring at his fingernails.
Look, the United States has no choice but to seize this opportunity and create millions of great paying jobs that your energy plan has suggested and mine as well. An energy infrastructure of tomorrow, not going back to anything that was before, tomorrow. And we take a backseat to no one when it comes to fighting climate change or when it comes to creating good paying jobs, middle class jobs, union jobs.
Union job. What are you talking about? We have 30 million people who are out of work. Okay, we've gained 17 million people on the unemployment rolls. You want to lose an election? This is the way to lose an election. Seriously. Is to say crazy radical things that Trump can actually pick on in the run-up to the election. The other way to lose the election is to be a complete buffoon. And that Biden has done in spades. He made 3 separate gaffes in this thing last night. First, he named the economy twice in his working groups, which is like the full-on Rick Perry, but he doesn't get treated like Rick Perry because he's Joe Biden. We just pretend he's old, senile Uncle Joe. Here he is, gaffe number 1.
Bernie and I have agreed to establish, as we said, we already talked about it, 6 policy working groups. 1 on the economy, 1 on education, 1 on criminal justice. It should be reform, not punishment. 1 on immigration, climate change, and the economy.
Oh, like the economy twice. Well, that's important. Also, gaffe number 2, then he's trying to get his aide's attention. Remember that time that Marco Rubio swigged from a water bottle and it was a huge deal? Here is Joe Biden trying desperately to get his aide's attention in the middle of a live stream.
With so many folks unemployed and underemployed, we've got to make sure that the government comes up with a continued set of policies that protect those workers. And the pain all over the country is now horrific. You have seen, as I have, these lines of cars.
And I mean, what is Joe Biden doing here? He's like trying to spoon something and like, what's going on? This is song and dance at the old age home. Finally, gaffe number 3. Biden says he's going to put millions of citizens on the pathway to citizenship, which would be weird because citizens don't need a pathway to citizenship, as the word citizenship would actually suggest.
I really think we should be thinking about having a new office, a new cabinet office on pandemics in the United States, but that's another issue. But we're going to finally achieve comprehensive immigration reform as well, put millions of citizens on a pathway to citizenship, including so many who are on the front lines right now. The number of undocumented who are out there now risking their lives.
What is he talking about? Okay, so this crazy old kook. I'm so glad that everyone is proud to endorse, including Barack Obama, who literally was left with only one option. So good stuff there, Democrats. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.